Alright, I'm back here with part 2. But like I said, I apologize for the noise in the background, that's outside. But again, basically, it says, continuing on with this second statement that's up on this thing here, because okay, well, let me continue on. Let me kind of reiterate or kind of recap what I said here. Basically, this is material that was blocked out, and these are statements before it in this latest, like I said, chapter of the whole Penders Archie Comics court case. It states that there's this. The blocks you see in the image above, okay, to recap, they may not appear to be much, but they actually are our first indication of a rift between Archie and Sega over this legal mess. The blocked out material, along with several exhibits missing from the dockets, appear to be redacted from public record via protection order. In certain areas of the motion in supporting affiliates, it's easy to see why. And then it goes into those two little dots, two little dots, if you will. And it says, it's easy to see why, ... material appears protected right before introduced discussion about Sega's business practices with Archie, and the agreement the two share to produce the Sonic comics in general. Now, continuing on, it's easy to connect the dots, however. The above image, taken from the affiliate of Archie co-CEO John Goldwater, begins with this sentence before the protected material begins. Specifically, this sentence, and I quote, before the protected material begins on here, and I quote, and you'll see this when you click on the link. Specifically, Ken Penders has damaged the relationship between ACP, Archie Comic Publications, and Sega. Now continuing on, in the motion itself, before another portion of protected material, lies this statement. In part, which appears to set up problems renewing the comic license with Sega once Penders filed his copyright claims before the end cuts off. The 1992 license agreement with Sega was renewed repeatedly until 2010. As the agreement between Archie Comic Publications, ACP, and Sega came up for renewal over the years, they would enter into routine renewals prior to the expiration of the then current term of license. However, in 2010, when Penders began filing for registration of his I can't even pronounce this word. Courts use such big words. Perpetrated, or basically began filing for his so-called rights in the works and asserting infringement, perpetrated, or whatever it's called, rights in the works and inserting infringement. Now basically what that means is because of what Ken Penders has done, damage basically to Archie and Sega has been also done. So in other words, whenever the license comes up again for expiration and renewal, there may not be a renewal. But I continue on. We should note this is a motion, not a judgment or a court order. Penders and his legal team have until March 6th, in the next few weeks, to file a response and/or an opposition. Even then, a ruling may not come until much later. A ruling in favor of Archie may not be a slam dunk either, and should this motion be denied, it may compel Archie to seek settlement terms with Penders. In lieu of that, the case would go to trial. We'll re-examine the pre-trial report and the surprising past contributions to the Sonic Comics Penders plans to call if it gets that far later this week. And then, of course, on here we got some people kind of asking, certain questions in response. Like we got some comments. Like one person says, these are just a few examples of people that commented on the article. And one person says, somewhat off topic, but what would Penders do with the characters and stuff if he did win? Not to say that I think he would, and I hope this all doesn't end the Archie Sonic Comics as we know it. And then someone here we have somebody responding to that person by saying, that first comment by saying, Ken Penders wants to sell a graphic novel series with the characters. And then the third person here says, I think, and these are just like I said, people that commented about this article. The third person here says, I think the more appropriate question to ask is what would Ken Penders actually do with the characters within the extent of this graphic novel series that he's trying to sell. The basis of these characters and backgrounds, and character traits are so deeply embedded into the Sonic the Hedgehog mythos that it would range anywhere from difficult to near impossible to write for these characters without using any elements from the Sonic the Hedgehog, and basically they put into a little quotations or apostrophes. And we all know that after this fiasco, even if Penders somehow magically was able to win over the rights to these characters, Sega would never allow Penders to borrow any non-disputed Sega-owned Sonic characters for his sake of his stories. And then they continue on, not to mention that Archie Comics would have to somehow write these characters out of the Sonic the Hedgehog continuity, and possibly the whole Dark Legion too. In a way that logically made sense. It's not going to happen. Makes sense. It's not going to happen. I feel kind of bad for Penders since he admittedly wrote some pretty interesting stories for Sonic the Hedgehog, but those characters belong to Sega, no contest. And then one last person here says, someone, and basically this is the last person, last of the four on here, because I only wanted to do 4 pages. I just wanted to get the article. The last person says here, in comments, someone needs to sit Ken down and have a little talk with him. Tell him to let go of the past and move on with his life. Tell him to finish that one graphic novel with the boring villain that popped up in one of those awful supersonic specials or something. Life is his oyster, he just needs to move forward. Now I know someone's going to watch this and hear that last quotation and be like, hey, that should be all you guys that are complaining so far with what Ian Flynn's doing. Maybe, maybe not. But basically what this tells me is that because of Ken Penders doing what he did, the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book may not last much longer. Now what I'm thinking is going to happen is probably specifically what we all think is going to happen, and that is if the license comes up for expiration and possible renewal, that the only way that 250 could be the end. Now, if that is the case, because of this whole situation, then I'm pretty sure a certain head writer has no choice but to end this whole book on a happy note if he's still around. But what are my thoughts on this? Well, I think it's obvious we all knew that Ken Penders was way over his head on this. I mean, yes, it's one thing to say, hey, look, I want to use my characters. I want to use what I created to do what I want. But it's another to basically not remember or try to, I guess, assume that you never signed certain agreements. Because when you sign certain agreements, no matter whether you have a copy of it and you decide, you know what, I'm not going to use this, you know what, this doesn't really matter, guess what, it does matter. Because you should get a copy of what they sign you. And if they sent you a copy, which they have, then they have evidence. And if someone comes out and says, yes, here's the evidence, this is his signature, then there you go. Now, it's understandable that he wants to do a graphic novel with these characters. He wants to add in, he wants to go a darker route with the characters in some way. But the thing is, he's got to remember, Sega, when it comes to the Sonic franchise, doesn't go very far when it comes to being very dark. I mean, the darkest they ever went in a video game so far was Shadow, and that was it. And that was the only E10 game near T rating that they've ever had. The thing is, if Ken Penders wants these characters back so badly, then he should basically do a settlement. Maybe work out some kind of an agreement where it's like, okay, I'll use these characters, but I won't make any references. I mean, that's what he needs to do. Essentially, that's what he needs to do. He needs to do something. I mean, if it does come down to the fact that, as mentioned there, they have to do a settlement, then fine. Now, I know people might be upset by the settlement deal and say, oh great, there goes characters like Linda, there goes characters like Julie Sue, there goes this character, there goes that character. You know what? So those characters are gone. Yeah, it'll be disappointing, but you know what? If that's what Ken Penders wants, that's what he's going to get. But you know what's funny about this is apparently Ken Penders isn't just at fault for something like this either. Ezekiel 300 here on YouTube pointed out something that I think we already knew. He pointed out that he went to one of the Sonic sites, I think it was Saturday Morning Sonic, and found out that Ken Penders was one of the sole reasons that a third season, if not a movie based around the third season of Saturday AM, was never made. Yeah. That's what he found out. Because apparently Ken Penders and Ben Hirsch were going to probably work together, but it looked like Ken Penders went behind Ben's back. So, what does that tell you? But anyway, my thoughts on this overall is Ken Penders better pray real hard that something positive happens to him, because if not, he's got literally overall 5 counts against him on this case. So, that's all I'm going to say, folks, about it. I thank you all for tuning in to this edition, 2-part edition of Sonic Comic News. Comment down below, tell me what you think. Talk to you all later.